Hey there, this is Carrie Dills, and I wanted to go over with you how to get up and running with the developer version of the Utility Pro theme. So if you buy the professional package, you get the regular Utility Pro theme, which is just kind of ready to rumble, and then you get the developers edition that's got some extra tools built into it that are really helpful. So we're going to start there. And what I am, where I'm starting at, just for a frame of reference, I've got a desktop server site set up that's using this desktop server blueprint. You can go to your account over at store.carriedills.com and download both this desktop server blueprint file and this developer's edition. If you want more information about how to get up and running with the blueprint, check out this tutorial over at carriedills.com for working with desktop server blueprints. And then I actually use this Utility Pro blueprint as the demo. Okay, so once we get that site up and running, what it does is set up a, under Documents Websites, that's where desktop server stores the website installs on in my configuration. So I've got the WP content folder, themes, I've got Genesis, and I've removed the regular Utility Pro, and I want to replace it with this developer edition. So I've got over here on my desktop, where is my desktop? Boop. Okay, I've got Utility Pro Developer. Again, you download that from your account over at the store, and I'm going to take that and pop it over here into the themes folder for my demo site that I'm working on right now. Now, if I open this up, we're going to notice some differences between this and the regular Utility Pro theme. For instance, or most notably, we've got some extra files in the root called package.json, bower.json, and a grunt file. We also have a folder called assets, and in that we've got all of our Sass files that have the .css extension. So let me show you how to get up and running with these. Now there's a couple of requirements for your system. First of all, let me go ahead and refresh this. And now that I've got an active theme in there, Utility Pro, there we go. Okay, I need some updates, but I'm not worried about those. Okay, so if we go back over to what is currently a very thinly, terribly documented section for developers, which I'm hoping to correct starting with this video. You're going to see that there's a couple of system requirements. The first is Git, and the second is Node. Git, because we're going to be putting these things under version control, and Node, because Node is something called a package manager, and we're going to be using a package manager to basically call in external pieces of functionality that we don't have into the theme. So for instance, you know how Genesis requires ongoing updates. It's a parent theme. We don't control, we're not putting Genesis under version control. It's, whenever they tell us there's an update, we've got to go manually get the update. So you can think of Genesis as a package. Now, it would be silly to package Genesis with Utility Pro or with every other, child theme out there, because, how much, I think Genesis, the size is maybe like, I don't know, like 400K. It's pretty small, but you wouldn't want to package that with your theme. You want to call it in externally. And so what a package manager like Node.js does is it says we want to include all of these packages in the development version. We don't want to actually literally package them with the site. We just want to have a reference to them in the site, and that actually happens in this package.json file, or JSON file, which I'll show you in a second. And then when we run a certain command from the command line, it'll go out and get the latest version of all those packages, which is very cool. Okay, so in order to use the developer version, you're going to need both Git and Node.js. I'm not going to go over the details of how to install those. They've got some good documentation on their respective sites. And also the WP Development Workflow webinar series goes into greater detail on using these. And as a professional, if you own the professional license for Utility Pro, you also have full access to these development workflow courses. I'll be updating some documentation to show you how you can get that, or excuse me, get access to that if you don't already have it. Okay, so what we're going to do, assuming now you know you need Git and you know you need Node, so here's the really quick instructions. We're downloading the developer version of the theme from your account, which we already have. We've extracted it somewhere on the hard drive, and I've put it here in my WordPress install. And now it's time to get to the command line. So we're going to open up the command line, and we want to go to the, it starts us off at our just user root here, and we want to go to the root directory for this project. So you cd for change directory, and here's a little quick something you can do in Mac. I'm betting you can probably do it in Windows, but I'm just going to take that folder and drag it after my cd. And then that saves me from having to type all that out. And from there, I'm going to say git init, and what, oops, helps when I type correctly. And what that does, it says initialized a Git repository. So now I'm working in a Git repository. The first thing I need to do is add all of those files. And I guess I should have done a git status first so you could see. But all of these files, which are my theme files, it's now adding to this repo. And I'll say git commit. And just initial commit. Okay, so now if I do a git status, what it's going to show me is that there's nothing to commit. No files have changed. We're tracking all the things, but nothing has changed. Okay, now let's open up. Let's open up this Utility Pro in Sublime Text so we can kind of see real time some things that are happening. Sorry if you hear Stargate or Battlestar Galactica in the background. It's Saturday and my husband is enjoying his reruns. Okay, so here I've got my theme folder opened up, and the next set of instructions here is going to be to run npm install. And what npm install does is it takes a look at this folder called package.json, and it looks and it sees, okay, here's each of these packages or dependencies that Carrie, or myself as the developer, has said I want to include as part of this project. So when I go to the command line and run npm install, it's going to install all of these things. So let's take a look at that. We'll bring this over here. So npm install. And if you're watching over here, you can see that it added this folder called Node Modules. And it's still doing its thing over here, but let's take a look at can I see it there? Excuse me. Okay, so now we can see our node modules here, just like we can see it over here, and we can see that it's installed all these packages. Now, if we go back to our command line and say git status, it's going to show that magically there's nothing to commit, even though I've added all these files. Excuse me. And the reason for that is that in my git ignore file, I've said to ignore these things. Now I'm getting a little bit off track for what I wanted to show you. When you're using Git, there's a file called gitignore that can be specific to each individual project, like in this case our Utility Pro theme, or it can be a global gitignore on your system. And I'm just going to show you what my global gitignore looks like. And I've got some basic things on there like ignore Sublime Text packages, this DS store that gets connected. Like I don't want those things in my repository. So git ignore says don't look at those things. Now, two other important things. I've also got node modules on here in my git ignore file, as well as a Sass cache. Now, if you don't have a global git ignore file, you'll want to create your own. And let's say we're going to put it in the root, and it's just going to be a .git ignore. We're going to use it, and I'm just going to copy these things to it. So depending on your setup, you'll want to configure this accordingly. And you know what? I'll post this git ignore online so that you can see, have access to that. But at any rate, the bottom line is, so now if I do git status, it's going to tell me I've got a new git ignore file. And that's because I just added one. So we do want that, or you do want that if you're not using a global git ignore. So you could go ahead and add that to your repo. That's just fine. Okay, so now we've got these files that are not being tracked, but they're added to our project. And due to this bower.json, I can at any point go in and, package.json. And if I wanted to update to the latest versions of these files, I could just run an npm update, and that would do that for me. So again, I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but let's go back. So the next step we need to do to get up and running is go and just say Bower install. And when I run Bower install, what that is doing is checking out this bower.json file and saying, okay, what have we said we need? And let's bring those packages in. And in this case, you can see that it added a folder called Bower Components, because this theme, we're using both Bower and Neat. Those are a bunch of great Sass add-ons that we can use to help us in our styling. So now that we've run npm install and Bower install, we've got all the packages, all those external dependencies that I wanted you to have for this theme. And of course, as you go on and pimp this theme out for your own use, you could, update these files to whatever packages and components you want to use. That's the beauty of it. So finally, there's one last thing to do as part of my instructions here, and that's from project root, run grunt. So this is kind of where the magic starts to happen. So when I run grunt, it's going to take a look at this grunt file and run all of these tasks that I have gone in and defined. And again, I'm not going to go through all of these because Mika does a great job of that over in the WP Development Workflow course. But two things I primarily want to point out. I've got one command in here for Bower copy, and what that'll do is take these Bower components and it'll just go nest them under your assets to kind of clean up your directory structure a little bit. And then we've got our watch. So what our grunt watch does is it says anytime we make a change to one of these Sass files, that end in .sess, grunt is watching to see any changes. And whenever it sees changes, it'll compile that into, it'll take your style.css file, which includes all of these partials, and then compile that into style.css. So when we look in grunt file and we see this Sass portion, that's basically the instructions that it's giving. So the first time I run grunt, I could just run just grunt. I don't have to specify anything in specific, and it's going to go through this whole file and do everything that I've asked it to. And you can see now that it's moved. It's moved my Bower copy, or excuse me, my Bower components here. It's nested them in my assets folder, which is cool. And now you see that it's just saying that it's watching. Doobie-doobie-doo. It's watching to see if any of your files change. Any of your, Sass files change. So I want to quit that for just a second. Oops. I hate it when I'm in the wrong window and start typing commands. So let's do a quick git status. And you're going to see that the only things that have changed here are the git ignore and then this assets vendor. Now, I don't really necessarily want to track what's happening here in this vendor file. So I could go back and add that to my git ignore, and then if I do another git status, we'll see that that's gone. It's no longer going to be tracking those files. That is sort of how you can use your git ignore file. Okay, so I could either run grunt again, and it'll execute this entire file, or I could just run something called watch. And when I run grunt watch, what that is doing is essentially just keeping its eyeball on these SAS files. So let's just, all we have to do is simply save. I don't even need to make a change, but that will trigger, you can see that it notices that that file was changed. It ran CSS Janus, which is that is for right to left, or RTL themes, which is something that was very important to me when creating this theme. So basically what it does, it creates, so it goes from this file was changed or saved, that updated style.css, and then because I have CSS Janus running, that also created a style RTL.css. And that RTL CSS basically takes anything that's left and goes right. So say if you have a padding left of 5 pixels, it'll change that to a padding right of 5 pixels to accommodate sites that are running with a RTL language. So anyhow, at the moment, it's just chilling. It's just waiting. Now let's say I go in there and I make some grievous syntax error and I try to save this. It's going to come back and, oh, that wasn't a grievous syntax error apparently. So we'll leave that off. Okay. Okay, now it's telling me that there is an error. It was expecting this semicolon, and what it got was a big fat nothing. And so now if I go look at my style.css file, you can see that it's a hot mess because it's just that error. And of course, if I were to go update my site, I would get the corresponding, whoa, there's no valid style sheet here. So that's another nice thing about working with SAS in a task runner like Grunt, is that you can see kind of immediately when things go wrong. So let's go back and we'll change our, oops, get rid of that error, save it again, and there it goes. So once you're up and, so at this point, you're now up and running. You're using the developer version of the theme. It's watching your file, your SAS files, and compiling them into your style.scss. At this point, you're in developer mode. You can do whatever you wish. My hope for you as developers with Utility Pro is that you take this theme and make it whatever is perfect for you. So for instance, I've got quite a bit built into this theme to accommodate RTL and internationalization components. And if you don't need those, you could go strip those things out strip some of those tasks out of your grunt file. Say that we don't go to package.json and say that you don't need some of these packages. You can add in your own packages, add in your own tasks, and that's the beauty of it. You can really make this your own perfect starter theme. So that's it for today. I hope this has been educational and or possibly insightful. Have fun developing.